Welcome to Hunters and Unicorns, the 2020 Mastery Mission. 20 topics, 20 guests for 20 minutes. We're here to unlock the tribal wisdom from the legends of tech sales to help you get one step closer to mastery. I'm Simon Kutis and I'm joined by my co-host Ollie Kune.
Welcome back to the show, everyone.
And we're absolutely delighted to welcome Andy Whyte. Andy, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Guys, thanks for having me on. I am a huge fan of the show. I think you guys have done so much for our industry, tech sales, bringing so much of the incredible thought that's kind of been not lost, because the people that are lucky enough to work with some of the folks you have on the show get to benefit from their wisdom. But you guys have brought that to the mainstream. So brilliant. Love it.
Oh, thank you so much, Andy. It's an absolute delight to have you on the show. I'm a big fan of your book. This one particular has got God knows how much scribbles through it, but me, the team, and we promote it heavily. So I think, saying back to you, Andy, what you're giving back to the industry, having spent time writing this book and the content that you're putting out is absolutely fantastic. And us personally as a business, it's had a huge impact on us. But we know within the community you're very well respected and regarded. So it's an absolute honor to have you on the show, Andy.
Thanks, guys. That's awesome.
Absolutely, yeah. You have been a real trailblazer for this topic, and we can reciprocate and say we are truly fans. So it's an honour to have you on the show. By way of an introduction, you are the author, host, and founder of MEDDICC.com, and as Ollie's just demonstrated, you are the author of one of the most important books, I believe, for anyone that is in the community in this space. It is a real staple of for any bookcase. So do kind of check that out. We have 20 minutes.
Yes.
Can you just introduce your topic, Andy?
Yeah. Well, you can, for those that are not listening on a podcast, you might be able to see behind my head, I have a neon light that says, "Nobody regrets qualifying out." And this is something I've been saying probably for the best part of 5 or 6 years now, because it occurred to me that in our industry, we're really focused on qualification. It's normally the first thing we think about when an opportunity comes up. But it seems to me like we work so hard to get opportunities that there's almost like this reluctance to qualify out. And one of the things I kind of learned earlier in my career was, if you go to qualify out, only good things happen, right? Because there's basically two outcomes if you go to qualify out of an opportunity. And by the way, when I'm thinking about qualifying out, this is based on you kind of realizing that through your gut, through evidence based on things like MEDDIC, that you shouldn't be in this deal. And so if you go to qualify out in that situation, one or two things happen. The first is the customer agrees with you, right? And they say, thanks, Andy. Yeah, we tend to agree. And, let's perhaps pause this project or come back to it later in the year, or not at all, right? Which is a good thing, right? It saves us wasting time on an opportunity that we can't win. The second thing that happens, and this happens more frequently than not, and I've been joking with people, but people think I'm joking. I'm actually serious, that when you go to qualify out, the other thing that happens is customers won't let you. And what I've been joking about is that the second book I will do is a coffee table book, and it will just be screenshots of me trying to qualify out of opportunities and customers not letting me. So I'm sort of saying, hey, this doesn't seem like a priority for you. And the page 1 will be me saying that. Page 2 will be the customer saying, no, hang on, no, this is a priority. And page 3 will be the DocuSign. Because every time I try to qualify out of an opportunity, so frequently the customers won't let me. So my topic's really about qualifying out, but one of the things that I've realized is our industry really gets qualification wrong. We don't seem to think about it what I think is the right way.
Amazing. It's as I said, it's an incredible tool. But I think for the purpose of our audience, 90 probably more percent are going to be big fans, and we know that they all use this methodology as such. But can you start from the beginning and tell us what MEDDIC is and what it's not?
Yeah, sure. Well, the important thing to think about when it comes to MEDDIC is how it originated, right? So as we know, inside of PTC, we're talking over 25 years ago now, and PTC effectively, Dick Dunkel was flying around the world meeting PTC salespeople, and was looking at running this exercise called "Why do we win? Why do we lose? And why do deals slip?" And basically, what he saw in the answers wherever he went, whatever PTC team he worked with, he saw 6 commonalities in the answers to, if you had these things positively, you won a deal. If you were missing one of these 6 things, it either meant that you lost your deal or your deal slipped. So what they did, the team of like Dick Dunkel, legends in the industry, Jack Napoli, John McMahon, and so many of the people you've had on your show, what they're able to do was basically compound these 6 commonalities into an acronym that we now know and love as MEDDIC, right? And for those that are thinking, wait, I thought it was MEDDIC, it's evolved a little bit. So we've added another C and another P, and some people add other letters as well, and that's totally cool too. So that's kind of how it's important to know how it started, because what we're effectively doing is reverse engineering how customers buy or don't buy, right? So that, I think, is one of the many reasons why it's proven to be so successful over time. And so what it really is a framework that helps, in my mind, keep salespeople on the front foot. I think that if I think about myself without MEDDIC, I don't have this like confidence around my deals. So I'm kind of like, I'm trusting my gut. What MEDDIC does is it gives me a framework that keeps me on the front foot. The best way I like to describe it, the easiest way I think can help people understand it, is that in sales, there's typically 3 pillars of things that are really important for a good salesperson to focus on. The first is value, right? We all understand how important value is. The second is stakeholders. And of course, stakeholders relates back to value. I think that sometimes people think about stakeholders just being like, who do we need to know? We need to know who's who and what are the levels of authority. But actually, it's not just about authority and how they make decisions, but actually, how does each different person care differently about different parts of the value as well? And then the third part is the one that I think that we probably don't focus on enough, is the process. But if I just say to you, good salespeople focus on value, stakeholders, and process, that's like quite zoomed out, isn't it? It's like you can imagine having a deal review with someone and saying, well, how's what you're doing for value? What are you doing for stakeholders? What are you doing for process? It's too zoomed out. So what MEDDIC does, I think it zooms in just the right amount to keep the conversation, keep the deal focused on the right things around value, stakeholders, and process. Your question also asked what I think MEDDIC is not. Simply put, a checklist. The worst examples I see of people using MEDDIC is where they use it as a checklist, because first and foremost, there's 2 major issues here. The first is, if you're using it as a checklist, you're retrospectively using it. You're using it after the event. So you're looking back, have I got a champion? Let me think. No, what do? You're already on the back foot at that point, rather than going into a meeting looking for that champion, right? As an example. So that's a major issue with it. The second major issue is that the number one beneficiaries of MEDDIC are the salespeople themselves. Of course, supporting roles and teams get loads of benefits as well, but the main beneficiaries are the salespeople. But if you make it into a checklist, it feels like admin, and therefore the sellers aren't going to love it. They're going to feel like, this is just another thing I have to do, and they're not going to get the full love and benefit for it that those that truly understand it will truly see what it's for.
So when done well, that's really, really insightful, and I think straight away, you can really start to see how some companies do this in the right way. A lot of, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what MEDDIC is and what MEDDIC isn't, and it's really good to kind of get to kind of grips with that, because I think this is a really important part. But when done really well, what kind of effect can this have on someone's career?
Yeah, great question. So I think the first thing to say here is it's going to make people more successful. But for the reason it's going to make people more successful is for a number of reasons. One is that first and foremost, and most importantly, being on the other end of a MEDDIC sales process, or a sales process using MEDDIC, is a great experience for the customer. If you think about zooming back out again to focusing on value, focusing on stakeholders, and focusing on the process, being on the other end of that is going to be a professional experience, which means, tick number one, the customers are going to like working with you, which means they're going to be more willing to introduce you to other people. They're going to be more willing to open up and build a business case. They're going to be more willing to working with you to accelerate the process, to make the process more efficient. So that's like the first win there. Is you're just going to come across more professional, and of course, coming across professional increases trust, which has a force multiplier effect of everything else you do thereafter will be more impactful to the customer for all the right reasons. So that's kind of the first benefit is just how your customers will perceive you. The second is that you're going to be better at portraying the value you provide, because not only are you going to be more articulate with it, but you're going to be able to talk to more stakeholders about it, which means your deal sizes are going to go up. More stakeholders involved, find more pain, find more value, you create more urgency, which would mean the deals close quicker. So straight away, you're like, customers like you more, the deals are going to be bigger and close faster. And then third, as an individual, what it's going to do is it's going to make you more efficient. It's going to help you identify the winners and the losers in your pipeline, which means you can double down on the winners and qualify out of the losers, which is just going to, again, compound, because you can have more time to spend on the good deals and waste less time on the bad deals. So as an individual, this is kind of what it can do for you in like that sort of zoomed in perspective. As you zoom out, you think about if you're a sales leader managing somebody like that, it's a dream, right? The people often will relate MEDDIC to forecasting and forecast accuracy, and they'll say it's a forecasting tool. That's rubbish. That's not what it's about. Don't get me wrong, you're going to be a much more accurate forecaster if you use MEDDIC, but that's just the byproduct. That's just because your pipeline's healthier. You've got a better understanding of where you stand. So what that means, if you're a more accurate forecaster for your career, is going to be awesome, because it's just going to mean that everybody, you call it, you're going to close it on time for the right amount. And that's just going to, if you imagine you're a sales leader and you know somebody who delivers like that, you're going to be the first person that gets the call of the awesome opportunities, the kind of opportunities that you guys are representing, right? You know the people I'm talking about that get those calls.
So Andy, obviously, the importance of good qualification, there are lots and lots of benefits, and I think we've really touched on some of those fundamentals. But I suppose a big question is how do you qualify?
How do you qualify? Yeah, well, it's a good question. I think this is how I think about qualification, and this is why I think so much of our industry gets qualification wrong. I think our industry, from legacy of BANT and legacy of more broad software. So if you think about today, we don't just have financial software or ERP software and marketing software. We're sort of 4 or 5 layers in from that. We're categories galore, right? And so most of our customers don't know what it is that our solutions do. They may have a high level idea, but we still qualify like they know exactly what it is that we do, right? And so we're entering into these engagements and call qualification, basically figuring out if they got some money to spend on this, have they got the authority, do they even need what I'm selling, and what's their time frame? When in reality, often they don't know what it is that we're selling. So how do they know that they need it? And therefore, I think about my career carrying a bag. It wasn't the best deals I ever did were the ones where there wasn't a budget, where I created the budget. Those are the best deals that I ever did for a whole number of reasons. So the idea of having a budget and the idea of going into that engagement and trying to figure out if someone has authority, all of those things are a horrible experience for the customer, right? They're not. That first off, being on the other end of that, being on the receiving end of being qualified like that, is a horrible experience. Secondly, you don't learn anything. Right? They're just like, you're almost being sort of qualified from a perspective like that the salesperson's sizing you up. Can I get off of this call and create an opportunity so the SDR gets paid and I get some more pipeline in my funnel and my boss gets off my back? That's not qualification. Qualification at a professional level is where you enter into an engagement with the customer to evaluate whether there is enough value in what you can bring to the customer that is going to make it worth not just your while, but the customer's while to enter into what is in our industry a average 3 or 6 or 9 or sometimes even over a year long sales cycle, right? So we're looking to see, is there enough pain here that my solution can solve, that I can provide enough value that's going to get this customer to come to the table and enter into a mutual exchange of value, so we can help them and they can help us to evaluate our solution. And if if there's not enough pain or there's not enough value you can provide, then it's not qualified. Or even if there is enough pain and you're thinking, wow, this customer would be mad not to work with me, but the customer's just not up for it. And it's not just that, the customer's not as smart as you are. It could be that they've got a backlog of IT projects as long as your arm, right? There's a whole load of reasons. But if that customer's not willing to engage with you, then that's another reason you should qualify out. So that for me is what good qualification is all about. It's about bringing mutual qualification, but it always starts with value. It always has to start with getting to the bottom of, is there enough value for this to be worth both of our while to enter into, as I say, what is a multiple month project?
How much of that is hypothesis versus discovery?
Good question. So for me, I don't want to just come and stand here and say, oh, we get all this stuff wrong. But I do think that having been on the other side of some discovery processes lately, and let me tell you, like, one of the funniest things about being, a company called MEDDIC is that everyone thinks that they're going to do a really good job of MEDDIC, but actually when companies don't use MEDDIC, it's a pretty tricky experience if they don't know how to do it properly. And so what I find when I'm being, on the customer side of discovery is that it feels like an interrogation, right? It feels like I'm just being asked questions, what keeps you awake at night, and who else cares about this, and what does it mean if you don't solve this? And I'm like, answering those questions is not fun for me. I'm not learning about your product. So I have a different view on discovery, that you have to kind of earn the right to get the customer to open up to you, because it's not, people ask me all the time, have you got some good MEDDIC discovery questions I can ask? And I'm like, no, there is no script. Right? If you're scripting it, you're doing it wrong. So I think about it like this. This is kind of how we kind of inform people they should do it. You should go into that first meeting where you're in discovery mode, and you should be able to very, very quickly, incredibly inform the customer about what it is your solution does for them. And of course, the people listening to me go, wow, that's a catch-22. I can't figure out what the customer needs until I've asked them some discovery questions. You're absolutely right. And that's why it's so important you do your research up front and you look at your existing customer base and you try and understand what are the use cases that this customer is likely to be interested in, and what's the value of those use cases to this customer. And that, what the value is, by the way, is really simple. It's like, what is the situation before they implement that use case? So what's like the nightmare scenario, the bad state that they're in? And then what's the utopia state after they implement your solution and implement that use case? And what's the delta between the two? That's where you find the metric. And that's where you can start to get customers to kind of think, okay, I can see where the value here comes. And then, because they think you're talking their language, they see that you have credibility. You haven't gone in and what Jack Napoli would say is called their baby ugly, right? We do that a lot in sales, where we'll go in and we'll say, oh, I was on your website and I see that you've got this thing happening, and ooh, that's bad, isn't it? And the customer's there going like, wow, I've only just met you and you're criticizing my business. And that, they're not going to open up and tell you anything else about their business, are they? They're just going to close up. This way, you talk about somebody else's ugly baby, and they're like, well, okay, I'm not the only one with an ugly baby. I always get into this analogy and then think I'm stretching the ugly baby thing too far, so I'll move on. But you know what I mean, right?
I think moving on from the ugly baby analogy, I think there is a really important point here, is that, and it's interesting how straight away we're talking about qualification and we start going into discovery, and we can kind of see how this whole qualification, this whole kind of this is a mindset, and I think this is really important. And I just want to talk a little bit about the fact that, what it is and what it isn't. I think the mindset and the belief system is actually essential to be able to really propel this and execute this in the right way, if we can go there.
Yeah, and I think mindset's a really great way of putting it. I think that one of the things about being a great qualifier, in the sense that I think about it, that doesn't get talked about enough, is we talk about the positivity of being like more efficient, picking the right opportunities, being, doubling down on the right ones, all that good stuff that I've talked about. One of the other effects is in the mindset, as you say, but it's how that mindset comes across to the customer. Now, if you're somebody that only enters, as I said before, only enters into engagements with the customer where you're saying, hey, like, not only I'm going to be looking to see if there's enough value I can provide to you for it to be both our while, but also I'm going to expect you to be working closely with me on this project. And if you're not, no worries, I've got 10 other customers like queuing up to work with me. I'm that busy. That tells the customer, not that you say it like that, but that aura, that persona tells the customer, oh, okay, this person must have some real genuine value to offer. Otherwise, they wouldn't be so happy to just walk away. And so it's almost like FOMO. The customer picks up on that subconsciously or consciously, depending on how forward you are with it. And therefore, it's kind of almost like a magnet effect. It pulls the customer more towards you. So that is something that I think is really, really an unspoken value that comes around being great at qualifying. And of course, the other part of that as well is that if you're qualifying well and you're only picking the opportunities where there's really good engagement, and I'm not saying you're going to win them all, but it looks like there's a good opportunity for you to do your best work, then that allows you to do your best work. But being in our industry, I think sometimes when we think about elite salespeople, we think that it's some sort of God-given talent, that there's like sports people, like a basketball player, like we think about basketball players being 7 foot tall or something like that, and salespeople must have this sort of innate talent that makes them great, the elite salespeople. I don't think that. I think anybody can be an elite salesperson. Sure, there's personality traits that are going to make it a bit easier for you, but for me, if you think about it, if you talk to if you think about all the elite salespeople and you guys will know hundreds, if not thousands, there will be a criteria of things that are all related to how they apply themselves to their selling. And those things you cannot do if you don't have the time to do them.
So, Andy, this is the part where we really kind of ask you to share some kind of practical things for our listeners and our viewers to really try. So, what recommendations would you make?
Yeah, well, I think I've kind of touched on it a little bit already, but just to kind of complete the thought here, the thing I'd ask people to try is this: to look at, for the next meeting they've got coming up, a meeting that you're looking forward to, if you're an IC or if you're a leader, work on this with someone in your team. The meeting you're coming up, if it's a meeting you're excited about, you haven't met the customer yet, but it looks like a good opportunity from outside in. Spend some time thinking about, right, what do I think are going to be these customers' pains? What do I think the pain that this customer is likely to have? And then think about that from a perspective of what other companies have you worked with who have had those pains that you've solved them for? It has to be relevant. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same industry. So if it's a retailer, it doesn't have to be a retailer, as long as the use cases kind of align or the pain aligns, right? And think about a number of those examples of where you've helped people, where you think the story of how you've helped people would be relevant to the customer you're going to meet with, and think about it from a perspective of being able to tell it from a story perspective. So this was the situation before they worked with us. This was kind of the nightmare state, the bad things that were happening, and really kind of want to dig into the pain that they had, because that will evoke pain in your prospect's mind, because they'll be living it vicariously through the story, right? Which we all know, storytelling is much more powerful than just reading off of slides. So the first thing, storytelling there. The second thing is you're showing you've done your research, because you're going into that opportunity saying, hey, I've done some research here. The third thing is about reference selling. It's about credibility, right? Because you can only, if you're talking about an existing customer, it's reference selling. I've already talked about not calling customers baby ugly, so you're not doing that by talking about somebody else's problems they have. And what all this is going to do, this is conversational, this approach. What this is going to do is going to hopefully lead into conversation that allow you to kind of see whether this is relevant. Are these the sorts of challenges that you're seeing, right? And then you can kind of once you've really done that, you've implicated pain, you've talked about the value you get from solving that pain, by proxy of another customer, you can then kind of try and pivot into saying, okay, well, that's that customer and that's the value they got. How about we dig a bit into your situation? So you look at their numbers, you look at their pain, and you try and, and depending on the type of sale you have, depending on the type of product you have, complexity and stuff, will depend on whether this happens in one meeting, or this can sometimes happen over multiple meetings. But the idea is you want to pivot from talking about somebody else's situation to talking about theirs, and using their real metrics, their real numbers, their real problems. So what you actually end up with is kind of the high level beginning of a business case for that customer, which of course is going to help them to qualify whether you can bring value to them. It's going to help them to get buy-in from other people that they want to bring into the conversation, because they'll be able to really clearly articulate what value you can bring, either by the personal value you've attributed to your solution for them, or by retelling the story about how you've helped somebody else. So this is a great way of using what you're using here, by the way, is you're using the implicate pain in MEDDIC, you're using metrics, you're probably using decision criteria to talk about how you do these things. And of course, you'll be talking about other stakeholders as well. So it's a great way of using that to open up the conversations. The great thing about this is this extends to SDRs and BDRs as well. They can use the same thing in their outreach, and it can go all the way through the sales process, because as new people come into the mix who don't have the context of all the stories you've told before, you can use those metrics to very, very quickly bring the new staker on side into exactly what it is that your solution is going to do for them. So that, for me, is and the point here is being on the other side of this for any stakeholder is going to be a good experience. You're going to be, it's going to feel consultative. It's going to feel like you've done your research rather than just peppering them with questions. So that would be a tip that I'd really recommend people try. And the feedback, I mean, it's how I sell, but the feedback from, we've got literally thousands of customers that have been through our programs, who say that this is kind of revolutionizing the way in which they go to market.
Amazing. I think that's a really great summary, and a really good place to kind of reflect. I think what I've enjoyed most about the session today, Andy, is that we've really started to kind of grapple with a lot of the misconceptions of MEDDIC. I think sometimes MEDDIC can be considered this binary checklist, or this, and even if you interpret this kind of the qualification, it's not whether or not there is a deal or there isn't a deal there. It's about qualifying whether or not I can find value. And it's about really going in and going through the discovery with the intent to find value, not qualifying whether there is something or there isn't something. And it's not about this binary, I have a forecast or I have a tick box. It's a process. And I think what I've, again, just really reflect on your last comment, I think what you've done really exceptionally today is help us understand the lens of a customer. What does that intent, how does that then land? How do you then receive that as a customer, as your experience on the receiving end of that? How does then MEDDIC generate such amazing results? Well, it's because it's driven by that intent to find value. And I think that is a kind of a real key that unlocks a lot of the success here. So again, I want to say a massive thank you to you for really taking the time to talk to us today. It's a real kind of privilege and honor, and as I said, we're big fans, so I'm really happy to have you on the show today.
Thanks, guys. It's been great fun. I've enjoyed it.
Sellers, could be seen as cheating a customer to buying into technology, but actually is quite the opposite. Anybody using MEDDIC is going to walk away from this if they're unable to add value and true value to your business. So for all customers that are listening, I think that's a really important takeaway as well. But, jokes aside, obviously you've given us an absolute, great, overview on what your book is, but, for all of our listeners, I'll ensure that there's a link below to where you can go and buy Andy's book. Strongly recommend it. As I said, we've heard fantastic things about it, and we've also read it ourselves. So, really appreciate you coming onto the show and sharing some of that wisdom with us today, and giving us a bit of a snippet into what more MEDDIC can provide. So thanks ever so much. But to all of our listeners, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for tuning in. Please do subscribe to our various channels, iTunes, Spotify, and iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. I'll ensure all the links are in the all the links are in the description below. We'll get there eventually. And yeah, thanks ever so much again for listening.